when interacting with Milkomeda on the Cardano side, you take your ADA and you lock it up in that smart contract. Is there risk in users, locking up ADA in their smart contract and moving to Milkomeda?
Yeah, there is unfortunately, there's always like some level of risk, but you always have this risk even when you're using dApps in Cardano itself, because when you're using an app and, for example, you're providing liquidity, you're giving custody of your UTXOs. So sometimes it's going to depend on the smart contract if it has a bug. So and there is like this difference between like just working in the Cardano protocol level where you stake and you like can send funds, and this is pretty safe because it's at the Cardano level. But when you start using dApps, which I will say that are at the same level as Milkomeda, there is another level of risk because this is not, you stop being at the protocol level. It's not IOHK building this. It's like other teams building on top of like what is feasible in Cardano. So we take this really seriously, and almost everyone on the team has been involved with Cardano as developers and doing a lot of stuff since like very, very early, multiple years. For example, I was the CTO of Emurgo until like a little over like a year ago. I also was one of the board members of the Cardano Foundation. Seba was who created this library Cardano called the Cardano Serialization Library, which is the wallet that every single wallet is using. Even Coinbase did integration for Cardano using this library that basically Seba created. And not IHK, not Emurgo, not other people in Emurgo. Seba created while Emurgo, but it was like Seba, the one that came out with the idea and did most of the execution with Rob, which is also in our team, and or Cardano Foundation. So we have already been created like critical libraries, so we have a lot of knowledge. And also, for example, we have Nicola Di Prima, who was the lead developer for Jorgungander, which for the ones that don't know, was the first implementation of Ouroboros, the consensus protocol of Cardano. In Rust, and that there is a lot of like OGs, Stakepool operators that actually they launch first in Jorgungander, and they start like getting the feeling of like what is to be a validator. So we have and we also have other people that like, for example, Rob Konaki, who was a board member at the Ergo Foundation. He brought like oracles to Ergo. He also brought like DJet for Ergo with me. We work on that. So we have a lot of people that are like really, really experienced. So we have really taken all the precautions as possible in the best practice in terms of security. And even we have done 2 different audits with like really good companies to make sure that everything is like very, very safe. But there is always like unfortunately some level of risk.
Yeah, there's always risk, especially with new technology. I have a question for you, because you have all of this knowledge and your team has a lot of experience. Are you guys more comfortable, with Cardano smart contracts because they're written, in Plutus, and it is a formally verified language, versus EVM contracts? Or do you think that we still need more time to see if that really, plays out?
Yeah. So right now, I think like the protocol, how Cardano is working right now, when you code the language itself is using formal methods, but when you write something, it's not formally verified out of the box. And actually right now, there's no dApp out there that I have seen that's been formally verified. They have audits. For example, we have seen with MintSwap, they have one of the best companies that actually works with IOHK in designing Plutus, which is Twig. And Wing Riders found a critical bug in there, and with formal verification that will have not happen, but they didn't do it because that's not ready yet, as far as I know. And even when you work with one of the top companies in the Cardano space, Twig, which is, like I mentioned, they're like part of the team that's creating Plutus. Like Manuel Chakravarti with Michael Peyton Jones are like designing Plutus literally, and other people are also working like the specs. They still found bugs. So right now there's still like some racing ball when you're building in Plutus. And also me, Seba, Rob Konaki, we have like multiple write-ups to IHK with feedback of how we believe like Plutus should evolve. And for example, like I think it's CIP30, where you should be able to like read information from other UTXOs without having to use them. And we have been saying this for like over a year and a half ago, because Ergo actually works like that. And me and Rob Konaki, we were working in Ergo, so we knew this, and we're like, Cardano needs to work like this. and like some other things that we also have raised. So I'm glad that Plutus now is evolving to be like more useful, like not more useful, more flexible. I mean, and in terms, because right now what happens when you want to implement an app, you actually need to have like, for example, for the case of SundaySwap, you need to have scoopers. So you have a lot of like code that's off chain, and sometimes you cannot have assurance of like some things because they're like outside Plutus. And when you have transparency and assurance is when everything happens on chain. And sometimes there are a lot of things that are like happening off chain.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. So earlier you mentioned that Milkomeda is currently a side chain on Cardano, and it seemed that you were suggesting that that will change, and the change is to layer 2, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So Cardano is going to go through like some really, really cool hard forks. There is one coming up in June, if I'm correct. And there's another one maybe in October or something like that. Don't quote me on this one. It's just from the top of my mind.
Yeah, no worries.
So this should make Cardano go faster. And also it should allow us to write more information, because what is the difference between a sidechain and a layer 2 solution? So a sidechain is as if you have, for example, I'm going to try to do an analogy. Let's see how it goes. Let's say that Cardano is a house. It's like a really, really cool house that's using like the best civil engineering like methods. It's like amazing house. It's looking great. A sidechain will be like a small house next to this house. So maybe there's like a path that you can move between the two houses. So when you have visits, they can stay in this extra house because there's not enough space in the Cardano house, so they can stay in this like side house, and everything is like pretty fast because they just walk 10 steps and they can. But still, it's another house. For example, if there's like, I don't know, a win or something, one security is different than the other. So a layer 2 is that we are actually building a second floor on top of this house, but this house needs to be like strong enough that can support the second floor.
And then,
so
sorry, go ahead.
All the information from this second layer it should be like written to the first layer. So right now, where we have seen, for example, with the launch of SundaySwap or some of the other projects that are going to be launched, that sometimes the network get like a little bit saturated and it takes like some time to execute transactions, stuff like that. So that's why right now it's not feasible to do a layer 2, because the amount of information that you have to write to Cardano would take too long. So for example, if you want to do a transaction, it takes like 30 minutes or 1 hour. Imagine that there's a block that takes like 1 hour to confirm in this sidechain. It will be so slow and people will complain, hey, what's going on? It takes 1 hour, and also I cannot do that many transactions. So for the time being, we started with the sidechain, which has like really, really good security properties, and also the bridge that we are using. All the teams like really good with security, but not even that. We hired 2 top-notch companies to do audit, which is arbitrary execution, and also Certic. But the phase 2 is to be moving to the second layer once Cardano goes through like some updates, and what is called data availability, it gets improved.
Okay, and then this layer 2, you guys are going to be using ZK rollups on the layer 2, and what are ZK rollups for those that don't know?
Yeah, so ZK rollups are a really, really cool technology. Rollups is related to, I'm going to split ZK rollups in 2 parts, the ZK part and the rollup part. Rollup part maybe is like a little bit easier to explain. So rollup is that everything that's happening in this chain, it gets written down to the main chain. So this makes things more secure, because if someone wants to recover the state of this layer 2 solution, they just need to go to Cardano and they can read all the information in Cardano itself, and they can reconstruct the state of this second layer solution. So that's like basically like a simplistic way to see rollups. The ZK part is like, I stand for zero knowledge. And actually, ZK rollups don't use zero knowledge proof, they use validity proof. So the difference that zero knowledge, I'm not a cryptographer, so validity proof is that you can validate that something happened, but zero knowledge, it go a step further, because it can like also give you more privacy preserving properties. So they're called CK rollups. All of them, from what I have seen, including Starkware, CK Sync, and other ones, are like validity proofs. So they create a small validation that you can check on chain that something happened. So you don't need to have like the entire computation. You just have like the validity, like the proof that a computation happened, and that can get verified in a smart contract. And once that pass, there's another smart contract that holds the state of the chain. So if a transaction happened that gets a proof gets created, then that proof gets verified on chain. That on chain is going to trigger that the state is going to move forward by this transaction that maybe I send you some ADA to you. For us, that maybe is going to be more like 2.5 stage or 3, because first we're going to implement like the rollup, and then the idea is that as a layer 3 solution on top of this EVM compatibility as a second layer, we will implement that layer 3. And for this, we will be trying to partner with other companies that are already like building a lot of like this architecture and this like tooling.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate that explanation.